Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Whitfield Report Thursday edition, special Halloween edition. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this very special edition of the podcast, and I'm so glad to be here with you all today or tonight or wherever you are in the past, present, future hour. And for all I know, ladies and gentlemen, by the time you're hearing this, it might be November 1st. So, in advance, happy November to you all, to those in the Savage Express. I hope you all are doing well. Apologies for this episode being put out so late, but truth be told, it was just a busy day here with, school and some other stuff. So this is really the only time I can record the episode here at the end of the day, but I hope you all enjoy it nonetheless. Alright, contact info as usual. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @SMDB_NGC. Hashtag Savage Express. You can also follow the Whitfield Report on Twitter at Whitfield Report. You can follow me on Minds and Gab at Sam Whitfield. Facebook.com/Whitfield Report. TheSamWhitfield.com is the blog. And, of course, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Apple, I guess Apple Podcasts technically is, iTunes now. They actually got rid of iTunes if you're a Mac user. So now you just have music. The Apple TV app is on the Mac desktop, and then the podcast app is actually now on Mac as well. And I like it, but I digress. You can follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor.fm/Whitfield Report is really where all the podcast links are. So, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're already listening on a podcatcher. But as always, please subscribe on those platforms, and please tell your friends to subscribe to the podcast if they like, a bit of pop culture and a bit of current events, or politics, or just sometimes, random goofiness. Like we've been tracking the Owen Benjamin stuff for the last, year on the podcast. But, anyway. With all that in mind, let's dive into today's episode. It's going to be a quick one here, but, happy Halloween to you, / happy November 1st, depending on when you're listening in the past for the future hour. I've never really done Halloween specials before. I thought because of the holiday, I thought it would be appropriate to review a Halloween movie. So I gave out 2 options to review on Twitter, and some of you answered that. To be fair, there were only 5 votes, but I think more of you probably saw it in your feed and for whatever reason just didn't vote. I gave the option between reviewing, if you guys wanted to hear a review either of Silence of the Lambs, which is like my favorite horror film, or Zombieland, which is like my favorite comedy horror film. And, to my surprise, more people actually voted for Zombieland than they did Silence of the Lambs. And I like Silence of the Lambs. I guess I'll briefly review that. I love Silence of the Lambs. It's an all-time classic. I'm not really big into horror films in general, and I guess that's part of the point, is like I'm not really big into horror films in general. I've just I've never done well with horror. It's just never really been my genre. Yes, I am one of those wusses that gets, scared by jump scares easily. That being said, I really like psychological thrillers. Um, and I really like dark humor. It's funny, I don't like horror films, but I love murder mysteries and, you know, like serial killer whodunits and, I loved True Detective, which was very dark, and very disturbing. So, you know, it's not like I don't like drama and whatnot and the psychological thrillers. I've just never really been a big fan of the horror genre. But I did like Silence of the Lambs because, you know, it doesn't really rely on fright all that much, but it does rely on like psychological, you know, uh, Hannibal Lecter gets, inside the head of Clarice and, in that movie and really kind of toys with her from inside of a prison cell. In Silence of the Lambs, gets inside the audience's head. And, it's not like overtly gruesome either. Like a lot of the horrifying stuff in that movie actually happens like off camera, like they allude to it, but you don't actually see it, which I kind of like, I kind of like that in a horror film. I know that some people like, blood and guts and they like showing it, but sometimes I believe that not showing, something like that can be just as effective and just as eerie and achieve the same, response from the audience that you're, uh, you know, a, attempting to do if you're a director. Um, so obviously that's a classic. A lot of people have seen it, and so go check it out. It's a great film. But whatever you do, folks, and please, for the love of God, if you have kids who are like, I don't know, 6 or 8, for the love of God, don't have your kids watch Silence of the Lambs when they're like that age. I had a friend who I grew up with, one of my best friends, who I not only was I in school with him, but we were also Boy Scouts together, and we're Eagle Scouts. And he watched Silence of the Lambs when he was like, I don't know, 7 and a half, like 8 years old, with his dad, like all alone one night. And it was like his dad was watching it, and then like he wandered in the room, and like his dad like didn't really think anything of it. And like that movie's terrifying as it is, but then uh when you're 8 years old, I mean, that's, you know like it's it's scary shit, no matter what. And then when you're like, hey, I can't even imagine that. I mean, he was traumatized from it, like to the point when we were like, in like 8th grade slash, high school, like on campouts, like he would get like really weirded out by like, certain noises. And like, at first we kind of poked fun at him, but then once he told us that like he saw Silence of the Lambs at like 8, we were all like, holy shit, you saw that movie at like, 8. So like, we weren't really making fun of him. But yeah, my advice for those of you, in the audience who have younger kids, whatever you do, don't let them watch it. Send them to bed early, or, I think like 12 or 13 maybe is a good age. Um, that's just me, but, for the love of God, 7 is way too young. But anyway, it's a good film, and I highly recommend seeing it. So, there you go. That I guess I'm kind of reviewing both films. Um, Now, what can I say about Zombieland? I actually just watched that tonight, for Halloween. And a few things. First off, I did not realize how old that movie actually was. And it just goes to show how fast time flies. That movie came out in 2009, believe it or not. So, approximately 10 years ago now. No, exactly 10 years ago. And I think at the time, like, I was either in 8th grade or I might have been, like, just starting my freshman year of high school when that movie came out. I couldn't find the exact, like, release date. I just kind of scanned quickly through IMDb. But still, like, I was like, my God, I can't believe that movie is 10 years old already. Like, I vividly remember when that movie, like, came out as a, like, when they were showing, like, trailers for it. And if I'm not mistaken, I think either The Walking Dead had just, like, started as a series, or um I think Zombieland might have even predated it. um I don't know. I know that Jason, shout out to Jason from the On Tap podcast. Listen to them on Fridays, exclusively on Spotify for now. I know that Jason will know for sure because he's a big Walking Dead fan, or I know that he was, or I don't know anymore. But I know that he was, certainly a big fan of The Walking Dead when it came out, and so chances are he'll know, when's Zombieland and The Walking Dead, synced up. But I do remember that Zombieland was like one of, if not the like first zombie like comedy films, or actually no, Shaun of the Dead was the first like zombie comedy film of my lifetime. And God, it's been forever since I've seen that one too. But I mean, Zombieland, you had Jesse Eisenberg, like a very young Jesse Eisenberg, like before he did the Social Network. Although people were already joking that he looked like Mark Zuckerberg. Then you had Woody Harrelson, who, um, you know, Woody Harrelson, man, has done a number of roles, and it's very interesting because he's one of those guys who either does like extreme comedy roles, where like he's like a total funny man, or he'll do like serious, like heavy dramatic roles, like in Natural Born Killers and True Detective. And I'll get to his character more in just like a sec. This one was a little bit more humorous, but there were also some, I guess, kind of serious moments. Then you had Emma Stone in that movie, who, by the way, I don't think Emma Stone has aged in 10 years. I swear to God, I actually just looked at a photo of her before I started recording, and she looks exactly the same as she did 10 years ago. Like, I'm sure, a lot of that is makeup and probably, some Hollywood cosmetics and whatnot. But even so, like some of that stuff, you can't really hide that well, and so she's just flawless. And yes, I'm speaking as a guy here partially, but also she's certainly a powerhouse actor, at least in my generation. And she did. I don't know if she had like very many comedy roles before Zombieland. I can't remember, but she did very well. And then Abigail Breslin, who was the little girl in Little Miss Sunshine. That's kind of her claim to fame. You know, I think I think that movie came out the year before, like maybe the same year as Zombieland. But she's in that movie too, and she's an interesting one because, like for 2 or 3 years, she was really famous. She did Little Miss Sunshine, then she did Zombieland, then she did like another movie or two that I can't remember what they were, and then she just kind of dropped off the map. I think, she really hasn't done much, and if like she was 12 then, I'm thinking like she's got to be 22 or like maybe 23 if my math is right. Like she's not that much younger than I am. But yeah, great cast overall. Oh, Bill Murray makes a cameo, and spoiler, and this was probably my favorite scene in the movie. There is a part of the movie where they basically travel from Ohio, which is where Eisenberg starts out, right? And actually, Ohio is Eisenberg's character name. So Ohio meets up with Tallahassee, who is Woody Harrelson's character. They meet up with Dakota, Emma Stone, and Little Rock, who is Abigail Breslin, although Little Rock and North Dakota, Emma Stone's character, they're sisters. So they meet up. They eventually wind up like going to California, and they because the whole town is abandoned, it's just surrounded by zombies. So they end up like crashing at Bill Murray's house, and they think it's abandoned, but like all of like the big Hollywood like movie manners are still like immaculate. And the funny thing is I know there's this one scene where like where Bill Murray actually dresses up as like a zombie, and they think it's Bill Murray as a zombie, but it's not, and he surprises both Harrelson and Emma Stone at first, their characters, and he's like, yeah, I've just been pretending to be a zombie and all of that. Well, then he goes in to surprise Ohio and Little Rock, and Ohio actually ends up killing with a shotgun, so there's actually like a whole big like, you killed Bill Murray, like one of the greatest actors ever, which now I understand where those like memes kind of from like 2009 2010 came from. I remember some of those were old school memes, ladies and gentlemen. But so they make a kind of a joke about that. And that becomes a whole thing, and then they end up like in an amusement park, and they end up killing like a bunch of zombies there, it's not like a hugely deep film. Like I said, it's a comedy, but as far as zombie like slash horror comedies, they definitely do this movie right to a certain extent. And after 10 years, it still holds up like really well. To the point now where they've actually, I guess, made a sequel, Zombieland Double Tap, which I know has been, kind of advertised. I don't know. I've seen mixed reviews on it. Some critics say it's really good and, true to the original. Some critics say it's really bad. Obviously these days when it comes to like critical reviews, you have to be a little skeptical of all that because, the critics hated Dave Chappelle's special and that was awesome. They hated Bill Burr's special and that was awesome. They hated the Joker movie and that actually got pretty good reviews. And that actually got like a pretty good, audience rating. So, you just never know. I probably won't see it in theaters. I might, but like it's not like I'm a huge, like must see in theaters. Unless I get like a really good deal on tickets or something. But like I'm hoping it's good, and I'm hoping it stays true to the original. But even so, the original film holds up very well, and I think it's definitely worth seeing. So that's kind of my quick review there of Zombieland. So, anyway, like I said, I'm not really a huge, fan of the horror, genre. Although I respect those that do. It's not like I'm shitting on, people who love horror movies or anything. It's just not my cup of tea. So, and on like a side note, I don't really get like, I guess I kind of get it, but like, I guess now I'm like a bit older, and by older I mean still kind of young. I'm still in my 20s. I've just never really gotten the need to like, shit on people for liking a certain movie genre or not liking a certain movie genre. Like some people like Star Trek, some people like Star Wars. Like I'm more of a Star Wars fan for sure, but I don't feel the need to like go, hey man, Star Trek fucking sucks or, anything like that. I'm kind of like, cool, you're a fan of science fiction, I'm a fan of science fiction, like we kind of have, friendly rivalries, but hey man, we're fans of the same thing. So kind of. So, that's like my approach. Same thing with like, horror films. Like I'm not big into like horror films, but I'm like as long as you're not like taking them, seriously, to the point where you want to like slash someone, if you're just like a fan, I'm cool with that. Same with me in like action movies. Like I love action movies. I know people who don't. I know people who think that like action movies are stupid. But, I like them. I'm not going to go out and like, be John Wick and, kill a bunch of people. Although if I did, I would only kill like, criminals or something. That would be awesome. But yeah, you just like what you like and that's that. And also, I've never really been like a fan of Halloween. I don't hate it, but ever since I, turned 13 and kind of like stopped trick-or-treating, it lost its, kind of lost its allure. When I was in high school, like, yeah, obviously there were a few parties, that may have happen, but like, Halloween is kind of just an excuse for millennial chicks to, dress up and be slutty like that. And I'm sorry, but it's true in my experience, and in a bunch of others people's experience. It's true. If you're listening to this either tonight somehow, or if you're listening to this on like November 1st or over the weekend, like, don't believe me, go check your Instagram, feed, and go check, the Instagram feed of like any Instagram model. And, like, I'm not necessarily, like, I'm not like poo-pooing it or anything by all means, but I mean, let's be real. I mean, Halloween, at least for me, is, I know that some people are like really into it, but it's just not the same for me as like, I would have to say that Christmas is my favorite holiday, and Christmas is certainly when we're going to pull out the big, stop for like a Christmas special. So anyway, speaking of end of the year, it's hard to believe we're already close to it. Season 5 of the Whitfield Report is, for those of you who have been keeping track of the Whitfield Report seasons on iTunes. Unfortunately, I couldn't really add like season 1 or season 2 to this podcast feed, but like we have season 4, we have season 3 from like last year. This year is season 4. So now we're adding into season 5 for 2020, and it's, it's pretty insane that we're doing that. Very happy about that. We've had a good year so far, and, it's not over yet, but we're going to have, a good year in 2020, hopefully too. So thanks to all of you who have helped this, podcast grow and, kind of like evolve from just a standard political podcast, which is what it was roughly, a year ago and prior, to more of like, an evolved, pop culture, podcast, and, an interview podcast. And yeah, I still do some, political stuff too, but, I think this season, that we've done this year of the podcast, I've really evolved the podcast. And I mean, yeah, some of that is me in the direction that I've, taken, but a lot of you guys have given really good feedback on where you think that this podcast needs to go. And, I don't listen to like every single suggestion, obviously it's my show, but at the same time, I do think there is, some, I do think that there is some room for, listener suggestion. I mean, obviously you guys are the ones listening to this, so you're the ones helping the podcast grow. So, but if enough of you have like a good idea, obviously I'm going to consider it. Like I used to only do this podcast once a week, and now we're doing 2. A bunch of you said that, you wanted the podcast on YouTube in video format, so we do that now on Saturdays as well. And we're just, continuing to grow and, expand this podcast. So I'm really glad about that. I'm also really glad, that I've ran into, other great podcasters like Ray from Ion 2020, Robbie Robertson from Out of the Blank podcast, Todd Mullis from Scapegoats podcast, and obviously my old, JFN radio colleagues, Jason and Tate, and their new co-host Andrew are doing On Tap as well. So very excited to kind of, be involved in kind of like a small podcast community of sorts. That's always very cool. And yeah, we're just, again, I feel really blessed to, just be able to expand and grow this podcast. And, like it's a thing now, and I'm really glad it is. All right, folks. So, like I said, we're not going to do a whole, like, hour, but I do want to, I do kind of want to spend a little bit of time on, like, the music and, pop culture review section for this week, especially since I forgot to do it on last, Thursday's episode. So, obviously, the big news of the week, in kind of pop culture, last Friday. So, depending on when you're listening to this, roughly a week ago, Kanye West. He had kind of been hinting at this for a while, ever since he went, MAGA, but he did it. He finally did what he said he was going to do, and he released a full-length, I guess, Christian, like, rap gospel album. And I've listened to it, and it's very good. Like, I'm a Christian. I'm not perfect. I probably, like, curse a lot more than the average Christian should. But, like, that's my one, I guess, kind of vice. And I really don't even curse that much, in my real life. But it's the album is called Jesus is King, and it's a good album, like, as far as musical content goes. The other thing is, like, I've never really been a big Kanye West fan. Like, I never hated Kanye, but, like, rap has just really never been my thing to begin with. And, then obviously Kanye West, at least in my lifetime, growing up in my, teenage years and some of my 20s, well, obviously Kanye West over the past, like, decade and a half has kind of had the reputation of being a bit of a moron, in the past. When he went over to the Trump train, and I talked a bit about this last year on the podcast, and somewhat this year, I wasn't necessarily, like, there were a lot of people who were like, he's full of shit, he's not really a Trump supporter. But then, it seems to me like he's actually, pretty much held fast to what he was, like, to what he was saying with, supporting Trump and, empowering the black community and saying that not every black needs to be Democrat, and like, he really opened a lot of eyes in the African American community, to the idea of being conservative, or the idea of being a libertarian, or I guess overall the idea of not being left, right? Like, they don't have to be left by default, right? So that was really Kanye's big contribution, and I mean, I think he's still there. I don't know if he's, like, fully on the Trump train, but I know that he's not left, anymore. He's not far left. And now with Kanye coming out as like a Christian, rededicating his life to, to Christ and whatnot, I think that's awesome if it's genuine. I'm not saying it isn't, because, and I mean, this is one of the reasons why I don't really like to talk faith this much on the podcast. I mean, I do believe that, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I know that. And I know that I am saved. But faith is, at least in my opinion, something that has always been, like, very personal, right? And I know that just says to go out and spread the gospel, but the way I've always, felt that spreading the faith is, I've always felt, and I know that it differs for people, but for me personally, I don't feel like I need to evangelize, in the podcast format. If you're one of those, people that, does, good for you. That's your prerogative. I like to, I like to live my faith just through my actions of trying to be good, to other people and do good by other people. At the same time, just talking one-on-one with people is, kind of like my preferred method, or talking in like a very small, intimate group. When Kanye says that God is using him to show off, I know that there are some skeptics, to that, saying that he's like now using God, to like justify his prophets. And I mean, that could be true, but his rebirth as a Christian could very well also be completely genuine and completely true. And I believe in a sense that it is kind of true. I mean, when I saw him on Jimmy Kimmel the other night when he came out, I will say this: the guy looked happy. Like he looked genuinely happy, and he actually looked healthy too. Like, for the last year and a half, Kanye has actually looked happy and healthy. He's got like a lot more of a positive vibe. He's not like, beefing with people on, social media. He actually kind of quit social media. Hasn't really been on Twitter or Instagram all that much. I think he might have gotten rid of his Instagram, although I think Kim still tags him sometimes. Like I said, I don't really follow Kanye West all that much. Like I said, I've never been a fan. But now I wouldn't really say I'm following him like as a fan, but I'm following him now as like, just because I'm genuinely curious to see where this goes. And if it is genuine, I wish him the best of luck. And if it's not, well, then I guess all those people who are saying, we told you so, I guess that'll be true, if and when the moment comes. But I really do genuinely pray that this is genuine for him, and I hope it is. So, Kanye West, like, even if you're not religious, I think it's an interesting study, kind of like taking a secular view. I think it's an interesting study, in the very least, to have someone who was so secular and was so, kind of atheist, made the complete 180. I mean, you can't deny, even as like a secular thing, that sort of change isn't kind of groundbreaking. And I think it's also groundbreaking that he's kind of bringing, a Christian culture, which is now kind of like a subculture, into popular culture, right? Into Hollywood, where Christianity and like, the subject of faith isn't really a topic that's, tolerated. In fact, it's frowned upon. So, I just find the whole Kanye thing fascinating, honestly. Like, I don't really have, I'm not, like, obviously I'm for him continuing to explore his faith if it's, genuine. I'm not really, like, going to bash him, for not coming here sooner, because, look, man, I mean, there's some, like, I've seen, like, grown men who are like 65 or even 70 who have never, walked with God a day in their life, and then, at 70 or at 65 or, whenever, they turn their life over to Jesus gently and they have a rebirth. So, who am I to judge Kanye in that sense? But anyway, so as far as Kanye goes, that's that. For those of you who have been watching the Watchmen series, and by the way, thank you to James Dellingpole for retweeting my Watchmen pilot, special episode that I did last week. Did not expect, someone as big as James Dellingpole to retweet me. And he's the editor of Breitbart London, for those of you who don't know. So yeah, I finally got a retweet from a Breitbart news editor. So, thanks for that, James Dellingpole. Very cool. Obviously, a lot of you guys know that I'm a bit skeptical of the Watchmen, series. I didn't really like it all that much. The first episode at least, because I just felt that it was so overtly leftist, it was kind of painful. And then to be honest, it just wasn't really memorable. I will say this though, the second episode has gotten a lot better. I think they're going after PC culture like a little bit, kind of making fun of the fact that that like Vite's, post utopia, is kind of like, leftist utopia, and it's not perfect, right? So I do admire that. But they're still painting, Rorschach as kind of like, in kind of like Rorschach's movement and ideology, the question government people as something like neo-Nazis, which again, folks, not everyone who, is like a libertarian or on the right is necessarily like a neo-Nazi. I mean, yeah, there are some extremists out there, but I'm certainly not one of them, and the vast majority of people I know, aren't like far right extremists either. Like, I'm more of a cultural libertarian, so, and like, there have been some extremists who have tried to, kind of like drag me into their, thing, but I just, kind of decline and walk away, or in my case, roll away. So, that really does kind of bug me, but the fact that they are starting to like show the cracks and bites, left-wing utopia, is, I guess, making an improvement. So they definitely have me intrigued now, I guess, compared to last week. Again, I don't really think this needs a sequel overall, though. The Watchmen graphic novel and the Watchmen book and the Watchmen movie, I mean, were kind of perfect on their own. But like I said, this series is out there now, so what am I gonna do? I can't really erase it. It's out there now. It exists. So, just best to kind of see where it all leads, I guess. So, yeah, that's kind of my quick, I wouldn't really say I'm cautiously optimistic, but, like, now I'm cautiously, like, kind of paying attention. So, you got me hooked for another week, Watchmen. So, we'll see where this ends for week 3 then, I guess. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so that does it for the podcast. We're actually wrapping up at like a good 45 minutes or so, I would say. So from all of us here at NGC Studios, wherever you are in the past, present, future hour, have a good day or good evening. God bless, God save this great nation, and I will see you for the Saturday show, 10 p.m., over on youtube.com/The Whitfield Report. And yeah, we'll see you then. Don't know who I'm going to have on as a guest yet, if I have any guests on at all. But we will, cross that bridge when we get to it. As always, stay tuned to my social media for announcements regarding that. And from also NGC, God, freedom, legacy in that order. And God bless and God save this great nation. Hey there, folks. If you've made it this far to the end of the podcast, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to the show. You are the ones that make it possible for me to make an income from podcasting, and I greatly appreciate that just by listening to our show. You are helping us gain ad revenue. However, if you would really like to help support the show, I encourage you to please donate to the podcast and become a supporter of the show. You can head over to anchor.fm/Whitfield Report and click the support this podcast button and choose the amount that suits you to support the show. Or you can click the link in the show notes and it will directly take you to that page. If you can support the podcast, I really, really appreciate that. Anything that you can do to help out is greatly appreciated. Even if you can't afford to help financially support the podcast, I encourage you to please go on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and please leave this podcast a positive 5-star review. That really helps us out here at the Whitfield Report. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next episode.